Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture series on the course of Applied Transport Modeling with Vism. My name is Mohit Qureshi, and today we will have our last offline lecture on scenario management in Vism and KPIs, key performance indicators modeling. Looking at our course schedule, today we will have our last lecture on this topic, and then in the next 2 weeks we will basically have two online sessions. Next week we are planning to give you the project assignment that will be the final project exam for you guys. And also, if you have have discussion and for any questions that you have regarding the project or regarding any previous lecture. Also, a week after that, we will be available online for any revisions or any question answers regarding the project or anything. So these next 2 weeks we'll basically have online sessions for the exam and for any revision on the topics that or if you have any confusions in any of the previous lectures. So looking at the lecture contents today, we basically have four parts. The first part is on a scenario management that defines, okay, why do we need a scenario, when do we need a scenario, and how we can basically create a scenario, changing different model attributes and indicators. Then the second part is on scenario creation. That is basically to define a new scenario project, and within this project we can do different modifications. So the second part would be defining different modifications, and then also defining different procedure parameter sets. So these parameter sets are basically the set of procedure sequences. So trying to only rerun or reevaluate those procedure sequences which will calculate the changes due to these modifications. And lastly, we can create different scenarios which will basically where we will basically define a different set of modifications and set of procedure parameters for a given scenario. Also, the third part we will try to cover is to understand key performance indicators. So what are the key performance indicators? KPIs basically are so model outputs which are used to basically understand the impacts of within the scenarios of different modifications, and these KPIs can either be basic model outputs or you can say processed model outputs. And yeah, the idea here is basically trying to create different outputs from the model so that we can better understand the impacts of different modifications or different developments within a scenario. And lastly, we will have a look at the scenario comparison, where we will basically first of all calculate different scenarios. So we'll create different scenarios and how we can calculate these scenarios, setting up different base cases, and then also doing the comparison. So comparing these scenarios. Then starting with scenario management. So first of all, transport planning is basically of three different levels, and the idea of transport planning is trying to determine the characteristics of transport systems which are which can give us the optimal level of service. So, so for example, you have a public transport, you have a road network, you want to try. So, for example, if you have a road network, you want to plan different traffic signal coordinations and stuff like these, different strategies or different characteristics which can give you the optimum output or optimum level of service from this system. So there are three different basic parts. So for example, the first part is the strategic planning. Strategic planning is something that is like the long term planning decisions, which can be a new development, a construction of new transport facility, a new public transport line, new road, another or maybe upgradation of a certain road, acquisition of technologies here, as you say, like traffic control systems and other things. So strategic planning is something that is a plan for a longer term. Then the second level that is a bit lower than strategic planning is tactical planning, where you have short to mid-term planning, which might have minor to no change in the existing facilities. So for example, public transportation plans rescheduling completely the public transports, applying some policies for congestion pricing, tolls, and having also maybe some some restrictions on the roads, some signal plan coordinations and stuff like these. So these are the like not signal plan coordination maybe, but on a bigger level, maybe roadside closures, one ways, and things like this can be more or less something that come under technical planning. And then the last version would be so the third level of transport planning can be of operational management. This is like the short term management, which is the most lower level, which is basically focusing on very particular aspects of individual transport. So optimizing signal plans, optimizing all the different available resources, optimizing the headways for the transits, or things like this. Yeah, so which are very more or less real time and on a very shorter scale. Next, scenario management, why and when. So, uh, by transport modeling, what we are aiming is to create models that can basically replicate our current transportation systems characteristics that are outside, right? And the scenario management is basically the next process of after developing the current model. And within scenario management, what we try to do is like we try to create different scenarios having modifications in our existing systems so that we can replicate future plans for transport planning, future strategies, future developments, and try to have try to evaluate their impacts or effects on our current system. And also we can also try to replicate events that can affect our transport routine transport systems. So for example, having construction works, having cultural events or different strikes, which is like these events which can actually change the transport system operations. For example, like the recently the COVID-19, I would say these last 3 months due to the COVID-19, there has been large impact on overall transport um, system. So this is more or less kind of an event that has the governments have had a lot of restrictions on usage of a lot of public transport. So this actually can have more of a mode shift towards private transport maybe, and also in the other sense that okay, your people are mostly work from home, so there's overall a very offload there's a lot of load off from the transport system. Next, how we can basically do the scenario management. The idea is to identify the right indicators and model attributes which are required to create the modifications or create a replicative scenario. The model attributes are basically what are the model attributes which are being affected or changed. These can be different as attributes from zones, links, OD pairs, or scheme matrices, and also the procedure sequences which will be required to be re-evaluated to evaluate the change due to these the change in model attributes. Second would be the indicators. So which indicators would be required to measure this change, and this can be different uh, link outputs, zone outputs, public, not really a lot of zone outputs, but basically zone based OD pair outputs, link outputs, public transport. So link outputs can be link volume, capacity, speeds, and public transport can also be public transport line volumes, public transport stop volumes, frequencies, and all. Yeah. So looking at, so this is the basic idea of how we can do the scenario management, or what is the idea behind scenario management. And now getting deeper into how we can do to create a scenario, let's go to Visum, and first of all let's see the slides. In the slides, how we can basically create a scenario in Visum, and then we will also try to go and do a hands-on for this. So starting, first of all, you can simply go on file, scenario management, and create a new project. And inside this project, we'll basically say that we will use the currently loaded data as the base case, and we can define the project name and also the base directory. So your base directory will have a folder for the project with all of the modifications in that inside that folder. And once you're able, once you select this and press OK, we will basically see the window which will which will be used for the editing of the project, and there are multiple tabs that can be used. So first of all is the basic settings, which will have the basic definition of the project and everything. And then we have scenario creation, define modifications, and calculate and compare scenarios. So looking at them one by one, so we will start by defining a modification or new developments, and this can be done under the modification tabs. Here you can simply press on this plus sign, and you can write the code for your modification and also the description. And after defining these inputs, you can press OK, and then here in the next line, in the next tab, we will have to select a base scenario for the modification. So this here we are basically specifying two things. So first is that is the modification depending on another modification. So this is selected under depending on. And the second thing, if the modification is mutually exclusive from another. So here either it's mutually exclusive or if it's depending on. So these things are like, if you have more than one modification, you can actually select the interdependencies between different modifications. Either they are mutually exclusive or they are depending on each other. So for now we are defining our first modification, so we will not choose any of this, and then we will basically choose the base version under the base scenario and press OK. And once you are done there, you will actually see a new popped up version of your model, which will be a replicate version from the base model. And here it's similar to your normal Visum window. Here we'll basically be able to modify or define your modifications, which will come under only that modification that you just defined. And here we will basically for example, now what we want to do is like we want to add some new zonal attributes in or new developments into zones. So what we'll do, we will basically click on zones, right click on zones, and then list, and within that we can see the zone list table. And here we can see that we had already copied the population and work from the previous four step models, right? So now the zone 6 and zone 7 sees some new developments, and we are basically changing its population attributes from 0 to 1500, and also the workplaces to 1500. And once we are able to edit it, we will simply press on the finish button here, and the modification is basically being defined. Now to visualize what are the different changes that you have run in the modification, you can select this modification and press on this I button, and this will also allow you to look at individually all the modifications that you have just carried out, similar to this window. So yeah, this is our model, the previous video model with the four-step modeling done from trip generation, distribution, mode choice, and PRT and PUT assignment. Now next we will try to create the scenarios that we just saw in the lecture. So simply we can go to File, Scenario Management, New Project, and here we can, okay, so I have to also select, I just selected my directory and also defining the project name as class scenarios. And then we can say that, okay, the base version is use currently loaded data as the base version. And then you can simply press OK. And once you press OK, so it basically create all the files that uh, in the directory we specified to generate the class project. So yes, the class project has been generated, and now you can see that this window where we will be defining all this the scenario attributes. So first of all, starting with the scenario so in the scenario tabs, we will be basically defining all the different scenarios. In the modification tabs, which we will just saw, we will have the new modifications that we want to replicate. So right now we want to replicate the new developments in two different zones. So we'll simply press plus sign, and here we can say new developments. and we can specify a group number as well and simply press OK. And now here, if you see, as I was telling you, so depending on if we select this, we basically have no other previous modifications. So in the dependencies we will see nothing, and also similarly we will have don't have any exclusions as well. So the idea is, like, if we have more than one modification, we can define the interlink between either if they are dependent on each other or if they are mutually exclusive. And then we have to select the base scenario which will be used for the comparison from, or which will be used to define these modifications, and we can simply use the base version currently and press OK. And now once we uh, have defined the parameters for defining this modification, now we will have a duplicate of our previous base model. Yes, so now this window is basically a duplicate of our previous model, and to define the new developments, we will basically simply click on right click on zones list, and here we can see that zone 6 and 7 have no population and only 10 workplaces, and this can be changed to 1500, and the workplaces can simply be changed to 500. And that's it. So we have basically added the zone attributes for population and workplaces for zone 6 and 7, and we can simply click on finish. So yes, by doing that, we have actually defined a new modification. And also, if you want to visualize what are the changes, we can simply click on this and press on this I button to show us what are the different modifications. And here under the zones, we will be able to see what the two different modified objects. So one is population. So population with attributes 6 and 7 is changed to 1500, and workplaces 6 and 7 is changed to 500. And yeah, that's what we have done so far, and let's get back to the lecture. Yeah, so after defining the modifications, the next part would be basically to define the procedure parameter set. So this is basically the set of procedure sequence we want to rerun or reevaluate so that we can see the impact of the change, or the changes in our model due to these modifications. And to do this, we will go to procedure parameter sequence, press on this add button or the plus sign button, and here we can define the code of our set and also the description of this procedure sequence. And we can also say, like, use the currently loaded procedure parameters and press OK. So once we do that, it's the new entry will be already created, and to modify this set of procedure sequence, we can select this entry and press on this icon for which is basically depicting the list of procedure sequence. And once you click this, you will be actually seeing the procedure sequence window, and this procedure sequence window is basically the set that we had from our previous base model. And here what we will basically do is, like, we will choose all of those procedure sequences that we want to reevaluate. And considering our four-step model, our four-step modeling, because we are changing the attributes for the zone, so we will actually have different trips from different trip generation, that is production attractions, because they are based on population and workplaces. We will have new production attractions, so we need to reevaluate the step of trip generation, and likewise later on all the step including trip distribution, mode choice, and the assignment. So we can skip the estimation of gravitational parameters or the calculation of skim matrices, because these two things are based on either the observed data and the model. So both of these have not been changed, but what we have changed is the zone parameters, and for that we need to reevaluate only the four procedure sequences for the four steps. So we can only select those, and then we can simply click on finish to modify or assign the final or finalize the step of procedure sequences. So next we will try to create the scenarios, and to do that we will go to the scenario tab and press on the add button, and here we will basically create two different scenarios. And now what is a scenario? So a scenario is basically uh, a given kind of a timestamp with one modification, and one scenario will basically give you will have a certain modification or no modification and its output. And if you, for example, want to compare the changes between a certain modification with and without, you can basically create two entries in these scenarios, one with that modification and one without, and then we will basically calculate them and then we'll do the scenario comparison. So now the modification that we have done, we will create two entries and we can have different codes for them. So we are defining it as now and future, and in the now case we simply choose everything from the base case. So procedure sequence set is 0, modification is also none. And then in the future case, in the future scenario, we set the procedure sequence set as without Calibre. So this is what we defined previously, and also the modification group as 1. So this is the modification where we have the zone changes. And yes, so this is how we can set two different scenarios for our comparison. So yeah, next we can go back to our Visum file and define the procedure parameter sets and the scenarios that we have just shown in the slides. And yep, this is our Visum file. And so once we have defined our modifications, the next thing that we can do is like to define the procedure parameter set, and this can be done going inside this tab and pressing this create button, and here we will basically define the code for this parameter set that we can say okay. So yeah, and we say that we want to use the currently loaded procedure parameters. We press OK, and then we can click on this entry, the newly created entry, and we can click on edit the marked procedure parameter set, and here, so this has bring us to the procedure sequence parameter set, and now here we can actually see okay, these are all the different procedure sequence that we created for the first step. And as we described before, we want to run from trip generation to trip assignment all the four steps, but the change here is actually just the zone attributes. So we don't need to run to reevaluate the skim matrices that are based on the model. So the road or network, or the public transport network, or the bike network in the model is not changed. And also similarly, to estimate the gravitational parameters is not something that we want, so we can skip that as well. So we can say okay, this trip generation, so I'm gonna move these up, so I'm gonna say trip generation, then distribution, because so one thing that I have missed in the slides, in the screenshots for slides, is the sequence here, because the sequence is also important for the procedure sequence parameters. So it will start with doing the trip generation, then distribution, mode choice, public transport assignment, and the PUD assignment. And yeah, so once we have finished selecting all the four steps, we can simply press finish button, and that's it. And that's how we can basically simply describe um, um, the procedure sequence step within the procedure sequence set within this tab. Next, we can go to the scenarios and click on a new button to create a new scenario, and we can say this as the now scenario versus. So here the procedure sequence set is from the base version. Modifications will also be no, and then the next version that we want to have is for the future with the new developments. And in this we will have a procedure sequence set that we just created for the zone attributes, and the modifications we can have new developments, and we can press OK. And yeah, this is how simply you can create the procedure parameter set and the scenarios. And next we will see in the slides how we can basically calculate these scenarios and create a scenario comparison for the evaluation of the impacts due to these modifications. Going into the lecture slide, next is the part of scenario comparison, and here we can basically execute both scenarios for calculation. So basically we have to click on this active box. We have to cross all of the both of these active box and press on this play button to execute both scenarios, to calculate both scenarios. And once it's been calculated, it will be like shown in green here, And next we can basically create comparison patterns, and this can be done under this comparison pattern tab. And here we can press a create button and define our comparison pattern. Now we have to define, okay, first we want to have the comparison of calculated results of the scenarios, and then we also have to define what is the leading scenario and what is the comparison scenario. So here, our comparison results will be based with reference to the leading scenario. So here we select leading scenario as future and comparison scenario as now, and we can say as the code for now to future and the descriptions. So once we set this, we can simply click on edit the comparison pattern. From this we will get into a new window where we need to specify the type of version comparison. And the idea here is, okay, we have two options, and we want to choose to use the attributes from the comparison network, or we can load the comparison network in the background. So we want to choose attributes from the comparison network, and also we want to change link bars automatically to see the differences. So once we select these, we will actually see in the comparison pattern, we will see the change as the link bars automatically. And we can simply select these two options and press OK. And also next, we can in the create version comparison, we can also select the attributes from our model that we want to use for the comparison. And here, for example, we can now this is an example, and you can actually choose a lot more different attributes for the comparison. For example, the link volumes, the public transport volumes, and also the trip distribution itself. But now what we are actually looking at is just a simple version of trip generation output, and this can be selected using the selection of the production and attraction within the zone attributes. And we can simply select these two and we can press OK. And this will basically do a comparison of production and attractions for the zones. And you can simply click on finish. Now, once we have also created a new comparison pattern within the comparison pattern tab, we can actually go back to the scenarios tab and select the two scenarios you want to compare and click on this comparison button or compare button. So once we click on this compare button, we will actually have to choose, okay, how you want to compare the scenarios. So we compare the scenarios choosing the comparison pattern that we just defined, and also define the leading scenario that will be set as the comparison. So if we set future as the leading scenario, so our comparison will be set as relative to the future scenario results. And we can simply click on compare to see the comparison results. And once we click on the compare, our comparison outputs are actually saved in the model, and we can actually go now to the zones list to add the comparison results as the table. So as you remember, we selected in the comparison pattern the attributes as production and attractions. So in this way, we can actually go to the zone list to actually view the production and attractions for each zone and their comparison from now and future scenario. So we will simply click on this list attributes icon, and within this we can actually add production attractions, production now, attraction now, and also further the change in the production attraction. So I will go and show you this hands-on. So first of all, an important idea, as I showed you these slides. So to calculate, so it's rather simple to calculate the scenarios, but once you have calculated the scenarios, the comparison patterns is something that is based on you. So if you want to just compare the outputs of trip generation, you can do that. If you want to compare the change in the OD pairs, or the trip distribution or OD pairs trips, you can do that. And even if you can go further and do the increase in you can run the mode choice, and you can actually have the OD matrices for mode based OD matrices. So due to this new development, what is the change in the OD matrix by car, by public transport? And similarly, also in the step of traffic assignment, that is PRT assignment and PUT assignment, you can actually go and see what is the change for the links. So the point is that you can define different comparison patterns, and here in this slide it's rather simple that okay, you can define the leading scenario you want to compare with, and okay, you can also define the comparison patterns code and title, so that once you want to see the comparison you can choose that title for the for choosing that type of comparison pattern. And here we are, when we are using productions and attractions as the comparison, you can actually choose, instead of zone attribute, you can choose a link attribute and try to see what are the link volumes, what is the change in link volumes instead. Yeah, so we'll also see another scenario later in the later slides. So currently let's go to the Visum and try to replicate hands-on on what we saw in the slides. So going onto the Visum project, the next idea, as we discussed, was to create a comparison pattern, or first basically calculate these scenarios. So we can select these two scenarios and press on the play button for them to be calculated. So calculating these scenarios actually will start a two new Visum windows, and it will run these procedure sequences with the modification or without the modification for that scenario, and then it will close the windows by itself. And now we can see that both of these scenarios have been calculated, and now the idea was to go to comparison patterns and create different comparison patterns to have the comparison for the indicators, so to define the indicators of the comparison. And to do that, we will press on this create button. And again, so to define comparison, we want to define the comparison on the or on the calculated results of the scenario. And we want to say, okay, it's our choice what we want to like choose as the leading scenario. We say that okay, future is chosen as the leading scenario and the comparison scenario is now. And then we can say, okay, let's say now to future. So we will see how it affects our comparison results. And we don't need to define anything in the description, but yeah, we can write whatever we want. And then we can say edit the comparison pattern. So in this window, you can choose two options. One is basically use attributes for the comparison network. So basically, the comparisons will be added as attributes into the model. And the second version is to load comparison network in the background. So we use the first option, and we where when so for example, now we want to do the production and traction comparison. If we use the first option, the difference between the production and tractions for now and future will be added as attributes in the zone table. And we can simply select this option, and also we want to, if you want to see um, the changes as bars linked to the network links, we can also select this option and we can press OK. And yeah, and here if you remember, we went into zones and we wanted to calculate the productions and tractions as the comparisons. We can also, for example, choose links, and we can also go here and choose volumes, for example. So V0 PRT or V current PRT. So we are actually choosing, we are also actually comparing a few, but there's like a lot of options for all different types of or all different model attributes that you can click and calculate. Yeah, and you can simply press OK here now. So right now we will also only go and check the production attractions. You can simply press OK, and this will help us generate the production. So because you want to see only the attributes for production attraction, we can simply press finish here, and the comparison pattern is already been defined. The next idea would be to click on scenarios and click on these two now and future scenarios for comparison, and click on the compare button. And here we have already the comparison pattern, because it's the only pattern that we have defined now to future. And then we can run the comparison on the calculated results of the scenarios. And now we need to define again the leading scenario. So we set future before, and we also say the future leading scenario as future now, and we can simply compare. So doing the comparison, we can actually, because the comparison results are already been calculated, we can actually go to the zone table, and inside here we can add the productions and attractions for all the zones. and this can be simply done by finding here the production. So we can say, you see there's like also addition inside this, like just production for this network and also for now. So what we are seeing here now is the future scenario. So we said leading scenario as future. So the model that we are seeing is actually uh, with the attributes of the future, and we have a comparison, addition of attributes uh, for now scenario. So to compare that, and we can simply add all of these productions, and then we can also add all of the attractions and see how does it look like. So we simply press OK, and now you can see, okay, all of these one by one. So this is the productions for future, because currently we are seeing, if you see this 1500 and 500 means that we are looking at the future scenario. These are productions for the future scenario. This is the productions for the now scenario. So if you see, there is like productions, zero productions for 6 and 7 zone from the now scenario. And then we will also see the comparison. So this is the difference between the current and the now scenario. So the future scenario, that is leading scenario, and the now scenario. And then this is the difference between now to future. So it's minus. So the change uh, from now to the future scenario. Yeah. So these are all like two different subtractions, and also these are different percentages of production and direction shown. So there are different some of the different results that we can see. So we have the minimum of now and future, and we have the maximum now and future. So because this is a very basic comparison, and it's just like you can see that the values went from 0 to 1500. So we are actually just seeing like 100% or the exact value of 2 to 3, and the comparisons are also like rather simple. But when we will have actually link volumes and other attributes or indicators as comparisons, we will see that these values are very helpful in terms that, okay, what was the percentage change in volume for links due to this production, due to this development, and things like this. So these comparison indicators are very useful for in that scenario. So similarly, we can also see for attraction all of the attributes or attractions for now, for the future scenario, for the now scenario, and and vice versa. Yeah. So even if we want, we can actually go back and compare instead the leading scenario as now. So we will see the results for now, and we can actually add future as the comparison, and then we will have all of these production as future. So the addition due to the developments will be shown here. Yeah. So that's what we wanted to show for the first comparison scenario. And the next idea would be to try and have multiple scenarios of comparison. So defining multiple scenarios and how we can do different comparisons. And to do that, we will start with defining another modification. And this another modification will be basically, for example, a simple load closure. And to do this, we will go back to the modifications tab, press on create, define the code as road closure, and yeah, set it as another group ID, that is group 2. Then if you see now, here we can actually select the base scenario, and now you can see in the base scenario you have two new options, that is now and future. And if you understand, the base version is what we have as the base model. Now is also similar to the base version actually, because we don't have any modification, and in the future we actually have modifications from zone developments. So if you want to compare along the new zone developments a road closure, you can choose base scenario as future. So it will do the modifications above the base scenario of future. Right now we want to select the base version as the base scenario, so we want to do the modifications on the simple version, that is the now scenario, and then we can press OK, and we can go inside to the model, and we can simply go and zoom in at this area to close this link for one side. Yeah, so we actually close for both sides. So we can simply click on this and do the closure. So basically we can double click and edit this link, and inside this we can choose that the transportation systems that are e- permitted to use this link, and we can remove all of others and just have additions or maybe nothing. And this will actually close the link for all different types of transport. And once we're able to do this, we can go and also visualize the modifications under the modification tab, selecting the modification and clicking on this I button to see or to view the modifications. And here you can see inside the link we have this link only for pedestrians. So it's like a pedestrian link only now. Yeah. And after defining the modifications, again we go same to the procedure sequence, procedure parameter sets. And now if you try and understand, uh, road closure can be short term and long term, right? Now the idea as a modeler is to think of how you want to evaluate this modification or this development or this event. How so? This is basically, if you consider this as a small closure for 1 week or 2 3 days due to construction works, this is a short term change, and this is like this doesn't need the steps of re-evaluating your mode choice and re. So if you want to try to understand in general the model, in the model a road closure can affect the impedance for the networks, so the impedance between a few OD pairs, and which can or which may lead to different mode choice, trip distribution. But this actually can it's really depends on the modeler, right? So if you have a big highway, if you have a new instead of this small road closure, if you have a bigger bypass, that bypasses that is being the proposed to bypass the traffic for all the through traffic in the city. Now this thing is something that will have a bigger impact on almost all the four steps, or at least maybe bigger developments in the infrastructure can have effects on all the four steps. But for example, a road closure for 2 3 days will only have an effect on trip assignment, so people will not be able to use that road and will have to maneuver around and find new routes to complete their trip. And for that we just need to do only one type of step, that is just a traffic assignment. And to do that we will just go to the procedure sequence and we will choose only one procedure sequence, that is PRT, traffic assignment. Yeah, and we set the code as traffic assignment, and we say yeah, just running traffic assignment. And we do that, and then we can click on the modification of to on this link, on this icon, to do the modification on the set of procedure sequence. And once we click that, we can see here that we just need to select only PRT assignment, and we can skip all of that, and we can simply press on the finish button. Once we are able to do this, we will need to add another scenario in the scenarios tab. So for this road closure, so and to do that we can click on this new create button, and we can write the code as road closure. We can say the modifications group as second, which was for the road closure, and we can say that the procedures parameter step as only the traffic assignment step, where we'll do only traffic assignment. Yeah, and once we are able to do that, we can simply click on this set this scenario as an active, and click on this execute button to calculate the scenario. And once it's been calculated, we can then go to the comparison patterns, create a new comparison, which will be now based on link volumes, probably not on production attraction. That I say because we are just re calculating traffic assignment, so there should be no change in the previous three steps, but only in the traffic assignment of PRT. And to check or evaluate the change, we can go to the comparison patterns. We can edit a new comparison pattern, defining the value, the other values that we want, leading scenario as the road closure and the comparison scenario as now. We can edit the comparisons, and we can go in links. So this is what I just show you in the Visum as well. We can go to links, and here we can select different attributes for the linked table. So volume PRT person, PCU, so different attributes or different units for the volumes of PRT. So we will need to simply select and we can press OK. And once you're able to do that, we can click on here. So we can also have a comparison visualized as in the network links. So once you click there, you will see this visualized version of the model, and here you can see that okay, you have some change or some increase due to the closure of that road. So this road has been closed, and due to this there's actually a change uh, in the roads around. So there's a subtraction in the volume here, and there's an addition in the volumes for this for with these few roads, as you can see. And we can simply press on this finish button. So there can be, so it's a good idea for you guys to explore more and more how we can define better visualizations for comparison patterns. What we are showing here is like a basic version how you can do the comparisons based on the links data. Now from here we can simply press on the finish button, and the comparison patterns will be defined. And now to actually see what was the change in the link table, we can see the changes due to this link closure. And to do the comparison, we can simply select these two scenarios for now and road closure, and then we press on the comparison. So when we press on the comparison, we have to again specify which comparison pattern, the leading scenario, and then click on compare. So once we click on compare, we can actually now go and see the link table. So we go to see the link table, and there we can add the vehicle volume, volume for PRT. And you see that, okay, again, similar to the zone table, you can actually see here the PRT volume for the leading scenario, which is the road closure scenario, and the now scenario. So previously this was the link volumes, and they have changed to this as the link volume. And now, the as I was telling you before, the percentages can actually be more useful and effective. You are saying that okay, due to the road closure, there is like an increase of like 2900%. So that is like almost many times the change. So most of the traffic goes in this direction. So before there's like only one vehicle, and now there's like 26 and 18 vehicles. So this is a larger change. There's a larger change of 87% on this link as well, for example. Like, so instead of 38 vehicles, it's almost doubled to 72. And similarly, there's a lot of reduction in these set of links from reducing the now scenario. So there's like increase in, so this column for example gives the increase of volumes from now to the road closure scenario. And yeah, this gives you the mean and max of the volumes. Yeah, this is a basic idea how you can see the comparison in the attribute tables. And yeah, the idea would be to also, you can also, as we were looking at, you can also have visualizations like this to show you, okay, because of that road closure, where is most of the traffic going, where is more added induced demand, and where you are actually having where you actually removing, from which area of the network you are actually removing the vehicles. It's And then from here you can try and create different set of scenarios. We will also have some questions in our project exam, where we will probably try to create different new infrastructure, have zone developments. And the idea would be to, if you want to evaluate um, the changes due to these developments or modifications in the network, the idea would be, if you want to see their impacts, you should try to do this traffic the scenario management, defining the modifications as different groups, then going in to define the procedure parameter steps, or which we want to require to run again, which will have the changes due to these modifications. And then you can define scenarios which will have these modifications. So one scenario has nothing, one scenario has a road closure, one scenario has a change in zone attributes, one scenario has a new public transport line. And then we create the comparison patterns, and in the comparison patterns we are defining, okay, which are the new attributes that we want to calculate for the comparison. So load closure, we want to see link volumes. Zone attributes, we can see production attractions, link volumes, or public transport volumes. If you want to add a public transport line, you can actually do even mode choice, because a new public transport line can actually will affect a lot on the mode choice. Maybe not a lot in the impedance, but in the mode choice, in the third step of mode choice, due to the public transport, there will be some zones which will have better which will have better impedance by public transport than private transport, and people will have a mode shift toward public transport. And so a step of mode choice and traffic assignment might be a nice idea. So we redefine the procedure parameter set like that, and do the comparisons based on you can say the mode choice outputs, that is the OD matrices by modes. You can compare them, and you can also compare the public transport and private transport traffic assignments. So the link volumes or public transport volumes can also be compared between two different scenarios. So next we can look at the last part of today's lecture, that is basically on the key performance indicators or KPIs. Key performance indicators or KPIs are basically the indicators which help us to identify the overall performance of different transport systems. For example, here today we will look into two KPIs that are widely used to assess the performance of any measure or modification into a transport system. So for example, today we want to see the total time spent, or total vehicles miles traveled on a network. So what is a TTS? So TTS is basically the amount of time that is spent by all the vehicles on the network, and VMD is basically the total miles that has been traveled by all the vehicles within the network during the simulation. Yeah, so ideally we would say that, okay, for a given measure in a transport system, we would say that both of these indicators should decrease. So the vehicles miles that are being traveled should reduce. And also, if you want to add a new route, for example, if you want to add a new if you want to widen maybe a new route or something, this should eventually help us to reduce overall vehicle miles traveled, and also reduce maybe congestion, or increase the overall capacity of the system, which actually eventually will affect the increase or the reduction in the total time that is spent by the vehicles on the network. But intuitively we can also say that VMT, that is the vehicles that are vehicle miles traveled on the network, can actually increase. So for example, if you have a bypass, you define a bypass so that we can reduce the congestion in the city center. This will eventually go towards increase in vehicles mile travel, because the route length will increase due to the introduction of bypass. But TTS eventually should never increase, considering that we have now higher speeds on the bypass, and instead of having a low speed route to the city center, we have high speed routes or vehicles going through the bypass. So another idea also would be that, okay, if you have two options which have similar travel time spent, so if your modification is also has the same travel time spent, the solution might also have lower vehicle kilometer travel to be considered a good a better performing solution. Yeah, so these two key performance indicators can help us to identifying the performance of a network system. Yeah, so now next what we'll go, we'll draw and try to see how we can evaluate these KPIs in Vism. These KPIs are basically linked. So for example, now if you want to see for public transport, these KPIs are basically linked with the link table. So the links, these are link attributes, right? So we can actually go and right click on the link, and we can also have graphical representations as bars. So we can right click on links, we can go graphical parameters, and we can go click on bars, and this will basically show us all the link attributes as bars in our model. So and we if we want to calculate these KPIs within the link table, we can click on the select attributes window, and once we select that, we can click on create user defined window. So basically we can define ourselves new attributes in the link table. And what we'll do, we'll basically create two new attributes for the links, which is TTS and the VMT, right? So for the first one, we can simply say the attribute ID at TTS, and this will basically be a formula metric. So it will be basically based on a formula from which will be the formula will be based on the existing link attributes, yeah. And this to write the formula, will basically use the add operand and the add operator, yeah. So the idea is that you can simply write a formula. For example, what is the TTS? So TTS is total time spent for vehicles on a network, and to define it, what we need to do is, like, we will basically select volume, or the number of vehicles for all the links for private transport, and then we will multiply. So we will first select the volume, and then we will select the multiplication operator, and we'll press OK, and then we will add the travel time for this is the given as t current underscore private transport system. So this is like the travel times, the current travel time for the for all the links. So the formula for TTS will look like something like this. So that is the volume for vehicles on the links multiplied by the travel time of the vehicles on the links, yeah. And once we press OK, we will basically be able to have the attribute for TTS. And similarly, if you want to have an attribute defined by VMT, the formula would be given as the volume of vehicles for the public transport multiplied by the length of instead of the travel time, yeah. So this length actually is the length of all of the trips for the vehicles, yeah. So we will also go and try to see it hands-on on Visum. So this is how you can define two user-defined attributes, and this actually can similarly be defined for instead of public transport, but for also for public transport. So not just for private transport, but also for public transport, yeah. Similarly, to do it for public transport, we can have the volume person PRT in multiply by the travel time. So we can have first the attribute of volume persons PRT, and that is like for the volumes on the public transport lines, multiplied by um, the travel time by the public transport system, so TPUT system, yeah. And similarly, VMTs is the public transport volume multiplied by the length of the, yeah. So once we are able to create these formulas for both TTS and VMT, we can add these user defined attributes here on the left side to the link table. So we can simply select all of these and press this right arrow to put them all in the table. And then when you press OK, you can actually, when you will be running your simulations, you can actually see that these new attributes, that is TTS, VMT, TT, public transport, VMT, public transport. So these new attributes, you can actually see them as link attributes in the model. So I'll try to quickly go and show you briefly how you can do this in the model as well. And to do this, I'll have to reopen my Visum. Just a moment. So this is our wizard model again. So for example, if you want to modify the graphical parameters or the bars, we can see, okay, we can modify the labels that you can see here in the white boxes, and also you can modify the bars how do you want to look like. For example, in bars display, you can actually modify different attributes, like we want to see volume PRT, want to see volume PUT, and other different values. You can scale them, you can scale the dimension of their thickness and everything, which is useful to have the visualizations. Okay, which attribute you want to see. So here you want to see public volume PRT. You can see other variables as well. And yeah, so also for labels we can see, okay, what are the labels that you want to see, different formattings, attributes. So which is nice to explore, to have the visualizations of different link attributes. Now if you want to go and evaluate the two key performance indicators we just saw, so we can go to the list view of the links, and here we can go to select attributes, And basically here we can actually add user defined attributes clicking on this link. And for example, I want to add TTS, so I'm not going to add all four, but I just want to show you one of them. So if I want to add TTS, the total time spent, I can or you can also say TTS PRT. But here we want to use it, we want to add this user defined attribute, and we do it as a formula attribute. And here when you click on the formula attribute, you can actually define the formula here. And if you remember, we said that the TDS is basically the volume of all the links. So and to see the volume, or to select, so and yeah, we said that this is the link volume, and to select the link volumes, we can actually come here and say, okay, I have to search, so this, so volume PRD vehicle, right? So we can simply search vehicle, and we the first attribute of formula is the volume of the PRD vehicles, and then we need to multiply it, or you can select this as well. I'm not sure if you can, yeah, you can actually select, click on this column and this icon, and click the operator you want. So I want this operator, and okay, I already had one. And then we want to multiply this with so we want to multiply this with the travel time, so t current, if I remember. So we want to multiply it with the current travel time of the PRT. So we can select this t current PRT system and press. Okay, so this has to do with the car probably. So we say car. So we want to do it for the car, and the vehicles, volume of the vehicles PRT, and you can press OK. And now you see this is already been created, and this you can actually click and see it here, and this and we can also move it up probably, so that we can see it before in the table. So maybe yes, so we can see it after the V0 PRT, and we can press OK. And once we do that, we see that, okay, TLTTS, this is how you can actually add your user attribute for the key performance indicator to it, and to get the output of this key performance indicator from your model. This is the idea. And similarly, you can also do more formula attributes for VMT, for TTS public transport, and others. Yeah, so that's it from today's lecture. um, I hope I am able to clarify most of the things, to cover most of the things. If you have any questions, queries, feel free to ask them within the next 2 weeks, or also email us on our emails. You can also, they have all your queries sent by email. Yeah, thank you for attending the course lectures, and see you next week on the live session. Have a good week. See you. Bye.